usually considered 0 to 30, and then the second part of the range is 30 to 180. So what did you feel in terms of, what was the greater contribution in the first part of the range that you allocated? In that 0 to 30, was most of the movement coming, and even on him, is it coming from the glenohumeral joint, or is it coming from the scapula? Well, that's a guess. Okay, so I want to. Yeah, it's one of the two. So this, I'm holding his inferior angle and I'm getting to 30 degrees. How much is my hand moving back here? Hardly at all. So the major contribution is the glenohumeral joint in the early range. Okay. So a rule of thumb is for the first 30 degrees of motion, 25 degrees come from the glenohumeral joint, and about 5 degrees from the scapulothoracic joint. So it's not that 2-to-1 ratio that we talk about. That's kind of a generalization. It's more like a 5-to-1 ratio in the beginning, right? So 25 degrees. The scapula, I mean, I'm going to exaggerate it so you can see. There's slight movement of my backhand, but everything's really coming from the glenohumeral joint. And then as I start to get past 30, okay, now see how the scapula really starts to roll, okay, and gets me to 180 degrees. So it's that second part that from 30 degrees to 180 degrees is where we switch to the 2-to-1 ratio. So that means I have 150 degrees to go, right? We did 30 already. So about 100 is coming from the glenohumeral joint, and about 50, these are abouts, from the scapulothoracic joint, okay? So the key is when you're doing low ranges, you shouldn't feel a lot of excessive scapular movement. It should be glenohumeral joint. And then we go to that 2-to-1 contribution. Does that make sense?
But if we're totaling it completely out of the 180, we're saying that 50 of it is coming from
It's about 55.
55 to 60, so if it's 60 out of 180, it's almost like that 3-to-1, but it's different portions.
Yes.
Wow.
The key is we say 2-to-1, 3-to-1, but it's different based on the range. You can average it out over the time, but you do want to know the difference between early range.
Right. So I think that that's what's more important, is to know the differences between the early and the later, rather than saying an overall 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, but understand how it changes during the range.
So what might happen clinically, if you have shoulder pathology, maybe a frozen shoulder, in that early range, when you start to range somebody, the scapula is doing all the movement. It's compensating because this glenohumeral joint is bound down. Those are abnormal mechanics. We shouldn't see the scapula coming in at that point. Does that make sense? So if we're seeing excessive scapular movements early, it's trying to compensate for something else that's going on in the glenohumeral joint. Other things that happen is somebody, you're lifting their arm up and the scapula is not coming for the ride. It's not gliding at all. It's not contributing. That's the person's going to start to get an impingement. Okay? Okay. Do you guys want to add anything to bony palpations or anything that we talked about in this section?
I would strongly suggest that you practice palpating more each other so that all of this finger touching stuff is a little bit more minimized. Right? It's not comfortable for patients to have poking around. It's almost feeling like Helen Keller, you know what I mean? Like, it's in there somewhere. Try to minimize that.
You need to get specific. So the more you do it on different pulses, different sizes. I mean, I'm a steward.